Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 32 of the Historical Humans podcast. My name is Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-hosts Coleman and Aaron Gilpin. And today we are going way back in history, about 41 years ago, which is actually fairly recent for us, given that we're a historical podcast. But
Yeah,
we're
Justin thinks anything that didn't happen since he was born is ancient history.
no, we've had a lot of debates off screen about what constitutes historical and what is too recent. There's a lot of debates back and forth, but we're talking about the Falklands War, which is quite historical and not all that long ago. I mean, 40
Yeah,
years is a while now, but
yeah,
There are still people alive who remember the Falkland Wars.
yeah.
yeah, a majority of our audience actually.
Uh, so we're gonna take you back in time to well, not necessarily a better time, but a time. Uh, so the Falklands War has one of the wonderful distinctions of being a rather short war, which is typically a very good thing. It
74 whole days.
Yeah, 74 days. It went from April 2nd to June 14th of 1982.
Yeah, this is like right in the middle of Thatcher's reign, right?
Yeah, this is Margaret Thatcher. This is her Britain going up against a rather interesting Argentina of all things. Falklands War is the English versus Argentina. They are fighting over the Falkland Islands.
So a
Uh,
colony. Margaret Thatcher's
uh,
England
Not
is
a, it's technically not a colony. The British classified it as a territory.
Oh, well, that makes it
that is the
different.
biggest distinction in the world.
It was to them at the time.
I mean, it also is a big deal to the United States. Still, one of the reasons why Puerto
Yeah.
Rico can't
So
be a state.
it's it's one of those things where it's technically not an empire if you don't have colonies.
Uh,
Air quotes on
I
colonies
and
there.
the whole thing with colonies was the dissolution of the whole colony system after World War One. They just reclassified it. France did the same thing. That's why France has territory in
Yeah.
South
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. So yeah, with the Falklands, for some people who they're not most prominent thing on the map. They're a set of islands about 300 miles east of Argentina, deep in the southern part of the Atlantic Ocean. The Falklands were originally claimed by the state of Argentina in the early 19th century. That's the first time really human beings or a geopolitical entity that is recognized lays claim to the island. So they are originally Argentinian or Argentine.
That was Argentinian.
Yeah,
Argentine. I am so tired of just going through all the different ways of this stuff. I do not sleep when we make these things. Uh, However, in 1833, the Falklands had been seized by the British, who forcibly removed anyone who wasn't British from the island, which was everyone. Uh, and they had just simply from that point onward denied any claim that Argentina had ever been there.
I mean that's the classic colonial approach of you just replace.
Yeah,
And deny that they
Yeah,
were there.
replace
Or
and
if
deny.
they were there. Or if they were there, you just say, well, they happily gave it up.
Were they
Yeah.
really here first? I don't really see them here. Like, it's just us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The population naturally spoke British when we showed up.
Yeah, that kind of logic. Argentina would press its claim on the island consistently up till 1982, which is when the war breaks out. Now, the war is kind of an interesting thing for two different reasons. First of all, the war has three names depending on where you are. It is known as the Falklands War to most people. However, it is also known as the South Atlantic War. In some circles, I believe those are largely, I believe it was British and a few other international communities referred to it as that in their time. And then to anyone who spoke Spanish, to Argentina in particular, it was the Malvinas War, because to Argentina, the Falklands are not the Falklands; they're the Malvinas Islands.
Malvinas? What does that mean?
I do not know. I do not speak in the Spanish.
I know mal is bad, but I don't. Bad vines?
That's Latin. I don't know.
Is it? Well, Spanish is real close. But anyways.
Yeah. It's well, it derives from it's a double take. Got up here. It's from the French. It's the Spanish translation of a name given by a French explorer, which called them the Les Malouins. I cannot pronounce it. There's a lot of vowels in here. Malouines, so Malonais.
You probably have pronounced 2 of those vowels anyway, so.
Yeah.
Take few, skip a few. Now you're speaking French.
Yeah, but anyway, the other reason why it is very very interesting war is it's also an undeclared war. It's one of the earliest. It's one of the earlier undeclared wars in history, and basically what this means is that both sides sent their militaries to fight. Both sides announced that they were fighting each other, and neither side was willing to declare war.
Oh, what's the fucking point?
What it was it's simply military action has taken place. It's not a war; it's military action.
What do you call a war then?
Special military operation.
Well, see, a war requires a declaration. Yeah. See, for it to be so there's a serious mess of Cold War politics in here. But the long and short of it is, after World War II, with the founding of the United Nations and this general seeming agreement that countries shouldn't declare war and attack other countries for the sake of taking land, it became very, very politically unviable to be the one that declared war. If someone declared war on you, then you were the victim and could beseech the United Nations and other international organizations for major help, resources, and a sympathy vote. However, if you declared war on someone, even in response to military action against you, you were still seen as the aggressor, as you were seen as the one escalating the conflict. So even though both sides come to blows and are actively trying to kill each other, neither side's willing to declare war, because if they do that, they lose international support by basically making themselves the aggressor in the conflict.
It's very interesting.
Oh, God.
I was just going to say, I think it's very interesting seeing the modern parallels.
I was say this sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah.
This is one of the first times that a major power is directly involved in one of these conflicts, not just supporting, one side via proxy war. And thus, this is kind of where we get the framework for a lot of our modern military actions and other wars that a certain nations have fought overseas in the Middle East very frequently. This is kind of where we get the model for how to handle that diplomatically.
Interesting.
If you can call it diplomatic.
Well,
I mean,
in
there
terms
was no
of
outright war.
well, the key thing is it's not diplomatic towards the people you're fighting. It's being diplomatic to the rest of the countries on the world. It's how you do it without making France condemn you as a barbarian, which is not an easy thing to do.
Fair.
I mean, it's France.
Yeah, France is
but
it's interesting seeing a lot of the modern parallels. Like you said, it's the framework for it, it's the precursor. But now we see a lot of these policies in action, and you hear the words a lot of like aggressor nation, and you see the military support that's being offered and given now, and it's kind of interesting to see like how this could have been potentially.
Yeah, and with the Cold War going on in 1982, if a major Western power, a major NATO power, a member of the UN, you know, permanent member of the UN Council, were to declare war on a, you know, former colonial nation, even though it's not a nation they colonized, uh, you can imagine the entire Eastern Bloc would jump in on it for a total feeding frenzy of the West is imperialist capitalist dogs who want to destroy your lands. Come join the Communist Party. There would be major propaganda boons against that, and Britain is governed by Margaret Thatcher at this time, who, for all her iron, for all her being, you know, what, the Iron Lady and whatnot, um, if there's one thing she hates most, it's communism.
Oh yes, the
So,
ultimate British girl boss of the 20th century.
Not to mention,
uh,
like we talked
yeah.
about earlier, this is kind of the last hurrah of British colonialism because it's an overseas holding of theirs. While maybe
Yeah.
not a colony in name, a colony in practice.
Mhm.
And you see Argentina trying to claim it. Like, it's a different story because it wasn't like an independence, a battle for independence, but just
Mhm.
territorialism.
Yeah, it was well. The war was basically being fought over who has the legitimate claim to the island. The island doesn't really have native inhabitants here at this point. I'm not sure it ever actually did. Even the British, when they are governing it, don't really have much of a presence on the island. It's not very hospitable to human life. So, um, it's basically which nation has the better claim of it. Argentina has the claim of we were here first, and Britain had the claim of might makes right.
All right, so what happened in Argentina that made them finally say, we're going to try and we're just going to try and claim it?
Uh, so that would be the Argentinian president, and I stress president with heavy air quotes here, uh, Leopoldo Galtieri, who decides he's going to press his claim to the islands by force. Um, and Galtieri is a lieutenant general in the in Argentina's military, because Argentina is run by what is known as a military junta at this time, which is basically it's a small council of military officers who govern the country in lieu of a civilian body. The nearest equivalent for this would be if the five-star generals at the Pentagon overthrew the president and replaced Congress.
Oh, jeez.
That would be a military junta, because it's not a military dictatorship. It's not one general running everything. It's a collection of generals running it as an oligarchy. It's a military oligarchy. That's a junta. So this junta um, uh, really needs this war to happen. They've done very poorly in governing Argentina. There's been massive economic mismanagement, which has caused a massive rise in unrest, and they're being actively accused by the United Nations of human rights violations. On
I've heard
account,
this one before.
yeah, yeah, military governments. Turns out they're not that good at actually taking care of the people they're supposed to govern.
Go figure.
Incredible.
And so the government of Argentina is really hoping that recovering the islands, reclaiming this ancestral land of theirs that was taken by the British, will boost their popularity on the home front and sort of get them out of all that unrest from, making everybody poor and, abusing them.
I will say too, it's not the biggest gamble in the world either, considering that it was a British overseas territory, and the distance between that and Britain itself was quite extensive. So, at least from an Argentinian perspective, given their original idea of claiming it, their original claims, on top of the distance and location of Britain, plus everything that happened post World War One, it kind of makes sense why they would think that this is a good political move. It does make sense, especially for a military
Yeah,
junta.
for a military-oriented government, it makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense, especially if you consider what happens in 1976. Because in 1976, there is a place called the South Sandwich Islands,
Nice.
and with them there is a place called the South Georgia Island. And in 1976, the Argentina set up a presence there illegally, and the British did nothing. They were unopposed, and nothing happened for 6 years.
Wow.
There was the total lack of formidable response emboldens Argentina to sort of try for the Falklands, because the South Sandwich Islands are located 800 miles further east from Argentina than the Falklands.
So why did they start with the Falklands then?
Because the Falklands have a British garrison, and the South Sandwich Islands are much smaller and not defended. They were simply claimed. They're simply claimed by a line on the map, and so Argentina's like, well, we'll just take these islands because they're there. They're near some of our, some of the routes our salvage ships use, and if nothing happens, we'll just keep them. And they kind of got to, mostly because Britain doesn't know they're there. Because again, there's no British presence in the South Sandwich Islands.
They don't just occasionally send the random ship to just go check up on it, like, oh, yep.
Well, they do, because in March 19th of 1982, on South Georgia Island, which is sort of the biggest island in and around the South Sandwich Islands, an Argentinian salvage vessel is spotted raising the Argentinian flag on South Georgia Island by a British ship. News gets back to England. War.
Really?
That's all it took?
Yeah, basically, the British object to the raising of the flag and tell Argentina to get off their island. Argentina responds by putting its navy on full alert and mobilizing. And thus, war has come. Now, when the government of Argentina does get to the Falklands, you might be thinking it used to be Argentina's territory. You might think they got a pretty good claim here. However, it's been a century and a half since there was anyone of Argentinian descent on the island. So when they get there, they are greeted by a British population loyal to Britain, and their immediate response is to imprison or deport everyone.
Oh, jeez.
This isn't looking good for them.
Which is ironically the exact same response that the British had to finding Argentinians on the island in 1833.
Okay, not looking good for everyone.
Yeah, two wrongs don't make a right.
It's an eye for an eye all the way through this.
And Margaret Thatcher has plenty of eyes to spare.
Yeah.
But to be fair, even that happens a lot. You see it now, even with the modern Cypriot conflict.
Oh no! I don't want to bring up Cyprus in this.
No, but it's true.
A lot of people don't. You're not wrong, but also how many people, or at least how many Americans, actually know about the situation in Cyprus too? So maybe we should do an episode on it.
Yeah.
That's too modern. I don't want to go to war with Turkey.
Turkey invaded Cyprus, which was full of Greeks. Now it's half Greek, half Turkish.
There's also a bit of British there too. Funny enough.
We don't talk about that.
No one talks. It's an island. Of course, there's British people there.
Explain Gibraltar then.
Gibraltar's a strait.
They have a piece. There's a small piece of Iberia that they own.
We love our British listeners, but we have to call them out on their conquests.
It's
Listen, they're gonna make
There's
fun of us
British
how
on
we say
every
aluminum.
island.
Listen, they're gonna make fun of us how we say aluminum. We're gonna make fun of them going into war. I will. I've been there. I will go back.
The hospital. The hospital. The hospital. We're all gonna be in the hospital if this keeps going.
But we don't have universal health care. I can't afford it.
All right. Speaking of people who are doing things they can't afford to do.
Oh no.
On April 2nd, Argentina invades the Falklands, and Port Stanley is taken. Now, Port Stanley is the only real settlement on the Falklands, and it's held by a small contingent of British Marines.
Wait, so is this how Flat Stanley became Flat Stanley? He was Port Stanley before that?
Let's see, where's the eject button for Justin?
Is Flat Stanley even a thing anymore?
I don't want to find out. Anyway, the troops, Argentina's troops, they take the island without inflicting any casualties on the British Marines. And this is because they were expressly ordered not to kill British people when they took the island. Because even though this is a military government invading for a big rah-rah military cause, they know that if they go in and kill English people, England's going to have everything it needs to launch the full force of the British Navy at them.
Which is still formidable.
Oh, the British Navy is very formidable. Argentina is at this time relying on some rather old tech. They're relying on hand-me-downs from France, America, and Germany, all of which were decommissioned at the end of World War II.
I was saying, I wonder where they got the ones from Germany from.
I don't know, but certain Argentinian German grandfathers might have questionable origin.
A lot of submarines were German. A lot of Argentinian submarines were German.
Crazy.
Yeah, I wonder how they got that.
Okay, tinfoil hats away, boys. We're not going down that route. I am putting the brakes on that.
Oh, don't worry. It comes up. It comes up later. It turns out the submarines were the most effective part of the Navy.
Oh, good. Go figure.
Very good against British.
Do they have their own code too?
No. Not that I found, and I'm not going to go looking. Yeah. A day later, on April 3rd, after Port Stanley is taken in a relatively bloodless assault, where no British Marines or civilians are killed, which is quite a feat in of itself. On April 3rd, Argentina formally seizes South Georgia Island, the island that sort of sparked this whole conflict. Their military arrives there and lays claim to it formally. And across both islands, Argentina deploys 10,000 troops. And this is where the shortcomings of Argentina's military start to show up. Because as much as they've done a coup de grace almost flawlessly to this point, the 10,000 people that they place on the islands are untrained, recently recruited conscripts.
Oh no!
Who are not given basic provisions such as clothing, food, or shelter.
Oh no!
And winter is coming in a South Atlantic island that practically shares a border with Antarctica.
The absolute parallels is astonishing.
You want to go into them? Go into them, please, for our audience.
I keep alluding to one of the probably most recent conflicts on the modern scale, if not the most recent. And you seem to notice a trend amongst aggressor states that use poorly trained conscripts, aka cannon fodder, and they don't tend to have the best equipment, clothing, or any sort of preparations, and it just ends up being quite sad, honestly, just seeing the absolute disregard for human life in those situations.
Well, I will say the one thing Argentina appears to have gotten right with this 10,000 troop landing force is they did remember to arm all of them, which should be a given in the military, but surprisingly isn't.
Well, what's the old Russian adage? You drop your gun where you die, so someone else picks it up.
Yeah, first one man gets a gun, second man gets a bullet.
Yeah.
First man dies, second man puts the bolt in the gun, fires back. So the invasion, which is hugely successful, is pushed through the Argentina's military, sort of media machine, and the war is hugely popular back home. It solves Argentina's problems. People are no longer talking about the horrible economic situation and the poverty in which they're all trapped, but they're talking about the glorious strength of their nation, as they have reclaimed this ancestral territory and righted a wrong that politics was never going to right. Clearly, a military government was the best government and the only way they were going to get things done. There is, in fact, crowds gathering at the Plaza del Mayo to celebrate the war. A literal mob forms outside the presidential palace of the Argentine government to celebrate said government.
Yay, they did
There's just a crowd of people dancing and cheering, and for once they're not calling for his head.
Guys, are they coming after me? Wait, they're celebrating?
Yeah.
Yeah!
Quick, to the tunnels, Mr. President. No. Hear the chant. They are calling my name.
Presidente. Goes full Tropico.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, that's exactly what this is
And we found the video game parallel only like 20 minutes in.
Oh, beautiful.
The United Nations, which is largely run by the English in conjunction with England's allies, condemns the invasion because, why not? And the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher doesn't declare war. She declares a war zone around the Falkland Islands. And this is a 200-mile radius around the islands in which anything that belongs to Argentina is fair game to be shot at. They have declared a theater of war. Now, the 200-mile arbitrary limit is there for two things. Number one, it's 300 miles to the coast of Argentina. So if you make it all the way to the coast of Argentina, you're being, very aggressive. You're saying Argentina doesn't have sovereignty over what is its own water space, its own, waterways. And number two, this is basically as big as they can get it. Again, without doing that. And because it's the British that declare this the theater of war, that's going to have some very serious repercussions for them later on.
I do want to interject here, though, and if they're doing it about 100 miles off of the coast, that also gives them enough room, and given their fleet, it would be enough space for a blockade. So you can suffocate their economy and their military using that as a non-aggressive form. Well,
without the war zone infringing on what what Argentina can claim as its coastal waters.
And with Argentina having the navy that it did, having so much of that space be considered open war theater, it's a pretty
it's pretty big. And on the 5th of April, the British gather their military might and send a war fleet from Portsmouth, England. The fleet is based on the theory of air superiority being everything. They are looking at this as an island war campaign similar to the American island hopping in the Pacific, where if you dominate the air with aircraft and aircraft carriers, you will overwhelm your enemy and cripple whatever is left of their navy. You can wipe out destroyers and battleships at will. So they center it around just two aircraft carriers, the Hermes and the Invincible. And because the British are rushing to respond, the troop carriers, the troop transports for this fleet, aren't British naval ships, but just cruise liners that happen to be in dock.
So the interesting thing about that is that's not that unusual, and it's something that every country has agreements with companies that are registered in their dominion. So the U.S. has it to where it's called the civilian.
We'll find it eventually.
Like the civilian navy, basically mercantile navy, I think, where basically in the event of a war, you contract out with these ships and hire them out to be war vessels to transport troops or to transport goods back and forth. And a lot of countries have that with both Navy and with aircraft. So it's kind of a cool system. The U.S. did it too. They did it a lot for passenger transit. Like they would basically...
I think you're thinking of the Merchant Marines.
The Merchant Marines. That's the merchant
that's
side
their,
of it.
That's their official name, yep.
I knew it was something, but yeah, basically, it's kind of interesting that the British took advantage of this. So all those cruise ships were probably registered in their dominion, and were called upon by the government.
Well, one is very British. It is the Queen Elizabeth II.
No!
Oh, God damn it!
And the second one, appears to be in some way Australian, as it is the Canberra.
Oh, jeez, not the Queen Lizzie too.
Yeah. This fleet consists of 100 ships, and it set sail to go retake the Falkland Islands. And it's pretty massive, and it's built around, again, these two aircraft carriers, which are going to be the limiting factor for much of the Britain's ability to wage war in the Falklands, because air superiority is kind of everything at this point. And at this point, in the 5th of April, there is a major divide in the international community around the war. Most European powers and European nations support the British.
That's a first.
Almost everyone in Latin America backs Argentina.
Really?
Yeah, that makes sense.
The only Latin American country to not support Argentina was Chile, because Chile was currently engaged in military conflict with Argentina at the time.
Was it over another land claim?
Yep, they were disputing the Beagle Channel, which has a series of small islands in it, and they were disputing the right to those islands. And they felt that if Argentina wins in the Falklands, Argentina will be able to better press their claim to the Beagle Islands, as Britain is an international power and Chile is not in 1982. This actually really does help the British, because the threat of a Chilean land invasion into Argentina keeps most of Argentina's actual military pinned down along that massive border between Chile and Argentina.
Yeah, it literally runs almost the entire length, actually.
It runs most of South America.
Like their border, the Argentinian border, the Chilean border. Yeah, it's...
So that's why the 10,000 troops that are committed to the Falklands Theater are all conscripts, because the actual soldiers are needed to keep Chile out.
And it's like right on the Andean Mountains, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe Argentina controls the mountains and Chile controls the coast.
Wow.
Chile controls the west coast and Argentina controls most of the mountains.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought they controlled like a little bit more of the mountains, but
Chile controls some of the mountains, but
not
like
all of them.
But most of the mountain range is inside Argentina.
Okay.
Like it's not a thin mountain range. Like this isn't like the Appalachians, where it's just where it's a narrow mountain range. This is more like the Rockies, where it's wide.
I gotcha.
It's not as wide as the Rockies, but it's got there's many miles of mountains.
But the border stretches effectively like the U.S.-Canada border. Like it just goes on for hundreds of miles.
It is ungodly massive.
So like that's a lot to try and protect and trying to like defend against. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, so that's the first major drawback for Argentina is that Chile doesn't support them in this war because of other disputes going on. The second major drawback for Argentina is Argentina was banking very heavily on the United States remaining neutral in the conflict.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. The basis for this appears to have been at least partially grounded in the Monroe Doctrine, under the idea that Britain is fighting to reclaim a colonial territory. Therefore, the U.S. should side against them, as it has done in the Spanish-American War and in a number of other conflicts surrounding the independence of various colonies. However, the United States does not see it that way. They see this as a war of territorial expansion between the Argentina government, or Argentina's junta, and the British Parliament. And the U.S. at first tries to negotiate, but both sides are intractable, and the U.S. sides with the British.
Yeah, it tends to happen.
Because the British, and that's in part because the British are a U.S. ally that have become very close with after World War II.
Yeah.
And Argentina is granting asylum to certain people that the U.S. government wants to kill.
Again, I can't imagine who would have gone to Argentina after World War II.
So, Cold War politics have really kicked in. There's a very much you're either my friend or my enemy mentality going on right now. And Britain is very clearly friends. So the U.S. does more than just throw political support behind the British. The U.S. allows the Britain to use U.S. missiles, fuel, and stockpiles on Ascension Island, which is a South Atlantic island featuring a military base by the United States. So basically, they gave the British a refueling and rearming port with 3 missiles.
Hey, if you need a place to crash, you can crash at my place, and we got a few missiles in the hangar. You can go help yourself to them. There's drinks in the fridge.
Tony Stark will make you another Jericho missile.
Seriously, they'll let the British do all that for free on one island to fight over some barely inhabited islands, but they won't give us free healthcare. Come on.
Yep.
Aaron, my friend, that's why they won't give us healthcare, is because they're spending the money on those out overseas.
Oh, you want to know something? Actually,
here we go.
They do
this
not.
Is why we don't go past World War II here, people. This is why I have my principles on this.
How do you lose $2 trillion?
The whole way through is completely devolves. We sound like the British Parliament at this point, just jabbering at each other. Do you want to be British? Do you want to be British?
God save us.
No, because on their grilled cheeses, they use white cheddar.
Oh, yeah.
That's gross.
Listen, South Canadian.
It's a subpar cheese. Cheddar in general is.
But if you're using American cheese, you've already lost.
Yeah, so I'll stick with the good old American cheese, but I just want some damn good healthcare, damn it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so the British got a place to crash.
Yeah. The United States also shares their military intelligence with the British, which, given the United States penchant for a little thing called banana republics, which is basically where the CIA has infiltrated the government of every Latin American nation for the purposes of controlling their politics. Suffice to say, the U.S. intelligence apparatus in South America is far superior to anything the British have.
We should do a podcast episode on banana republics.
I believe we do. I believe we have that somewhere in one of our idea bins.
So comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for that episode, guys.
Yeah.
It's another episode where they make me want to kill everyone here because they make me do modern politics. uh,
It is historical whether you admit it or not.
Yep. On April 25th, we have some of our first major engagements in the war. The British retake South Georgia Island from Argentina. The island that sort of caused this whole conflict to spiral out of control to begin with. In so doing, they capture one of Argentina's most definitely not German submarines. Please don't look at the markings too close.
I really hope it was just like gray spray painted over.
I just imagine it's just like a spray painted X over the markings.
Yeah, it's been 27 years. It's been repainted.
Then it's fine.
I would like to imagine it's a very bad paint job, and then when the sub resurfaces, the paint's like
washing
off.
Just
the salt has just washed it off. That's just horrible.
Oh, no.
It's just horrible. No.
The Fourth Reich rises. Oh.
No. And this is where things start to take a bit of a turn, because on May 2nd, the British make their first mistake, and it's kind of a major one. So you might recall we talked about how Margaret Thatcher declared a theater of war within 200 miles of the island, of the Falkland Islands. Well, on May 2nd, the one of Argentina's cruisers, the General Belgrano, is attacked and sunk outside of the war zone, which means that Britain violated its own declared boundaries for the theater of war to engage in warfare. This really makes you look like a warmonger, especially when you have to balance the politics of being at war at a time where you cannot declare war without major fallout with other nations.
That's an oopsie.
Yep. Argentina takes this in stride, and their navy comes back more robust and more willing to fight than ever. And I'm just kidding. The entire navy stays in port in Argentina's mainland for the rest of the war. They refuse to launch any further ships.
Jeez. To be fair, Britain's navy is like the best aspect of their military by far.
Yeah, and this
rule Britannia.
And this is a 100-ship fleet, so this is not a small fleet. This fleet probably, in terms of sheer numbers, probably matches or outmatches the
Don't say it.
Argentina's.
I was going to say not the Armada.
Yeah, it outmatches Argentina's, and it certainly has them outmatched for quality, as most of Argentina's military equipment is hand-me-downs from 1940 to like 1950s U.S., France, and Germany. And,
so they're using cruise missiles while they've got knockoff Bismarcks.
Basically.
Oh boy.
Basically. The Argentina's navy is going to spend most of the rest of the war contributing through the Naval Air Force and the rest of its German submarine fleet.
I mean, work with what you got, you know.
Yeah.
To be fair, German submarines were some of the best.
Which, fun fact, the Argentina's torpedo attacks proved to be the bane of the British fleet for the duration of the war. They are a constant threat. They do not actually manage to sink any British ships, but there are a number of near misses where torpedoes just scrape along the sides of holes or impact with no explosion. Because, once again, this military equipment hasn't been upgraded since 1940s.
Yeah, but you would hope that some of it would still work.
You'd be surprised.
And a lot of it does. However, the thing is, they're able to scare and scatter the British fleet. They're just not able to hit anything.
To be fair,
at least not effectively.
At least when it comes to like British munitions, they're technically not built to last. They're built to be fired.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not built to last. They're built to blast.
Yeah.
Basically, Punmeister. So anyway, Punmeister, so if these were built in, say, I don't know, 1944, and you haven't fired them until 1982, most of the torpedoes aren't going to work.
I mean, they had to peel the sticker off first of the old guys that owned it, the previous owners.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can like repair them, but also I feel
and I'm sure a number of the torpedoes were newer. It's just, part of it is the British Navy is extremely well trained and has learned how to deal with submarine attacks. So even though the submarine is, terrifying and, really scatters the British fleet, it's not able to significantly damage it.
I truly hope that the British had an old Navy commander who was in the twilight of his career, like a rear admiral that had seen battles and like stormed the beaches of Normandy, came back and was like, "Oh, we fought these back in my day. Let me show you kids something."
Yeah.
Now, if you look here, if you fire right at this spot, it completely capsizes inward.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that. For that. So most of the fighting is a pitched battle between Argentina's Air Force and the British Navy. That's where most of the fighting comes in, and Argentina's Air Force is mostly old U.S. fighter bombers, which possess no electronic countermeasures, no radar targeting systems, and basically no electronics of any kind.
Were they flying B-17s?
Basically, I'm pretty sure they had decommissioned flying fortresses at best.
Wow.
Fighter bomber. These are World War II fighter bombers from France.
Oh, wow.
So the interesting thing is these can be very effective, though, because they're not quite as quick as the modern planes were, nor did they have the same countermeasures. So it basically creates this interesting gap of technology where you're trying to overestimate your enemy and they're using less technology. It's like the guerrilla warfare.
Yeah. And these...
Unfortunately, that doesn't really work in the sky.
Yeah. Well, these planes proved surprisingly effective, and it's mostly considered a testament to the patriotic fervor and the dedication of the pilots in the Argentina Air Force, because it's considered how dedicated they were. They're able to take this outdated equipment and actually start winning with it.
I'll give credit where credit's due with that. That's some ingenuity.
Boom.
And skill.
Yeah. Argentina also had one key factor to back it to back up its Air Force, and that is they had one new military innovation, which is the Exocet anti-ship missile. It's brand new in 1982, and Argentina has Exocet to spare. So that is the basis of their work as. However, there is two massive limiting factors for both sides' Air Force that really limits and prevents either side from just wiping the other out. For Argentina, their ships won't leave port, which means they're launching at the Falklands from land-based air bases on Argentina's mainland. This puts the this puts the Falklands at the edge of the combat radius for these fighter bombers, meaning that they have one pass at whatever they're attacking, and then they have to immediately about face and gun it for home, or they will fall into the ocean. For the British, it's almost a similar deal. They are overly dependent on their two aircraft carriers, which are carrying only short-range fighters, because the purpose of aircraft on aircraft carriers is to launch defensive measures for a fleet or to launch a aerial brigade at a target that a fleet is already attacking. So it's air support, which means there's no long-range fighter capacity, which means they can't chase down Argentina's fighters once they start running away.
So Real quick, I know you mentioned
Yeah.
that the ships wouldn't leave port. Did we mention? I didn't really. I don't quite remember if we mentioned why they wouldn't leave port.
Yeah, so it is in response to the sinking of the General Belgrano, which Britain went out of its war zone to chase down and destroy.
Okay, so
And
they just wouldn't leave
Argentina's
in general.
yeah, Argentina's response is like is basically to hold up their hands and go, look, they're warmongers. They're sort of like a football player trying to draw a penalty.
Hey,
Like,
he hit me. He's hitting me. He's hitting
offsides,
me.
offsides. Like when everyone jumps up and points offsides, that's Argentina's Navy's response is to do that in the hopes that this will generate
Sympathy.
and basically anti-British sentiments
Okay, I got
uh,
you now.
on the international stage. They keep their submarines out there and their airplanes because those aren't ships, and the submarines are more effective than the cruisers. You can't really chase down the submarines.
Fair.
um, the and what this sort of results in is this sort of the fact that neither side's air force can really damage each other or run the other side down. You know, results in a sort of weird pseudo war where most of the British fleet stays out of outside the combat radius of Argentina's aircraft, and at times outside the war zone, unless they're attacking something. The British also don't, because they don't have the long range air support, attempt to set up a destroyer picket line, where the destroyers will see the ships the planes incoming, alert the main fleet, and about face. However, most of the British destroyers in this fleet are not equipped with things like anti-air missiles or radar.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's visual contact. For
Just
some of
what
these,
quite literally a dude in the crow's nest going, "Hi, is that a goose or is that one of the planes?"
Oh no, there's just
Uh,
geese flying through the sky.
just turn around like, do you hear whistling? Are you whistling? No, I'm not whistling. Why would we be whistling? Dive bomb.
Speaking of whistling, this is one of my favorite parts of the war, personally.
Yeah.
On May
Oh,
4th,
so you enjoy a
Yeah.
war?
But yeah,
Certain
basically
aspects.
the British are left vulnerable to attack, especially their forward destroyers, which is where the submarines come in and start scaring everybody.
And on May 4th, the Argentine Exocet missiles strike the British destroyer, the HMS Sheffield, which unfortunately sinks the ship. But the sailors had a moment that I think is one of the best moments ever. The British sailors start singing Monty Python's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life as the ship was sinking.
Yep.
Always look on the bright side.
Oh,
of
I
life.
think that's copyrighted.
Yep. But regardless, on May the 4th, the 4th was not with anyone in this engagement, because though the British lose the HMS Sheffield, the fighters that Argentina launches to destroy it, between 20 and 30% of them don't make it back.
Oh, jeez, that's
So it is a massive engagement, and it's actually this loss of aircraft that enables the British to land at the Falklands, as Argentina no longer has sufficient aircraft to basically run off the British, because most of the combat up to this point has been British fleet makes for the Falkland Islands. Argentine Air Force takes off. They fly through the air. They scare them off with a combination of submarine and aerial attacks, retreats to the mainland. British retreat out of the war zone. British fleet comes in, gets chased off. It's this back and forth. But this engagement, there's finally just Argentina is fatigued. They can't launch enough aircraft to keep the ships at bay. And on May 21st, the British forces land unopposed at Port San Carlo on the north of the Falklands. And And this is actually because of a tactical error by by Argentina's general on the Falklands. It was Argentina. The Falkland Theater was run by General Mario Menendez. He operated from Port Stanley, and when he knew that the British were coming to land, he retreated all his forces to Port Stanley, thinking that the British were going to do what Argentina had done, which is mass beach landing at the port and just overwhelm, try and overwhelm the only real habitable settlement, the only major settlement that could hold the garrison. Because you lose that garrison, you can't really fight on the Falklands. It's cold, there's no food, there's no shelter.
Yeah.
So he falls back to what he thinks is the most strategic position. And the British decide they don't care about that position. They're going to take over the rest of the islands and encircle him. And so they're able to get there almost without a fight. The British also wanted to go for the overland attack because attacking by sea had a higher risk of civilian casualties, and those civilians were imprisoned British citizens.
Oh, yeah.
So, we fire, you fire on Port Stanley. Anyone not in a military uniform who dies is one of your own people.
Yeah, it's not a good. It's like these people were. It's like the people were essentially hostages.
I wonder what they were thinking throughout it, though. Like, when Argentina came in and imprisoned them, do you think they were like, "You just wait till the Queen hears about this. You just wait till the Queen hears about it. They're gonna come and they're gonna kill you."
Yeah, Princess Diana won't stand for this.
Oh no!
Listen, they're Falklanders, okay? This is these are southern hemisphere Brits. So, I'm thinking
Aussies and New Zealanders.
Yeah, so I'm thinking a Yankee Australian combo will do quite nicely for them.
Oh no! Just wait till the Queen hears about this.
Crikey. God damn. I don't know what the Falklanders were like. I really don't.
And then next thing you know, just 100 ships deep come rolling up. Like, oh no.
Oh, it's gonna be a very weird Tuesday, isn't it?
Rolling. Just start doing the theme from Raw as the ships come in.
Oh no.
So Argentina's defense had about 5,000 people, and they actually do a decent job trying to hold the island. They respond very quickly to the British landing, and it takes a lot of heavy fighting for the British to wear down Argentina. Like, Argentina doesn't oppose the landings, which is a mistake, but everything after that, they make the British bleed for it, or at least they do their best to do that. They entrench themselves in every position they can find, and they constantly refuse to give ground without a fight. Argentina's Air Force maintains its focus on the British Navy in an attempt to prevent reinforcements from reaching the island, in the hopes that just if Argentina can keep itself entrenched in Port Stanley and the British can't resupply their soldiers, the British soldiers will succumb to cold and famine and maybe bullets. And this is where Argentina's Air Force really does start to shine, because it takes down 2 frigates, a destroyer, a container ship containing helicopters. So basically the land-based air support that the British were hoping for to overwhelm Argentina. And 1 landing ship that was attempting to disembark reinforcements. They basically hit a troop carrier and take it out. Well, it's attempting to, it's a full D-Day takedown, because it's attempting to land reinforcements on the island, and it just gets blasted.
The thing that amazes me, and I know we'll touch on it later, but the amount of people killed and wounded honestly surprises me hearing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's very intense, but surprisingly not very lethal. But back with the Air Force, there's two main failures with the Air Force. Number one, they are unable to damage or destroy either of the aircraft carriers, which means that Britain is able to screen its landing fleets. And because of that, the Air Force cannot sink enough ships to prevent the British from constantly building numbers and resupplying its troops. In fact, most of Argentina's aircraft is lost in this fighting. Most of their planes do go down trying to stop this inevitable advance of just wave after wave after wave of hundreds of ships.
It's honestly impressive. It's not only that Britain was able to muster that kind of strength, but that they're able to project their power so far away.
Yeah,
It's almost as if they haven't been doing it for,
Yeah.
200 years.
No.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
closer to
The
four
British
at that point.
the British actually press on through bad weather. There's poor weather in the Falklands at this time, and they push on through the weather to take Goose Green and Darwin, which are two other minor outposts on the island. And on the Falklands, an outpost can consist of someone built a hut. But these are two key points, and they actually push through a dug-in position on the ridges west of Port Stanley. Port Stanley has some high ridges on its western edge, which, if you control Port Stanley, are a beautiful defensive position. And if you don't, are the perfect place to rain bullets on them from.
Oof.
So the British take the high ridges.
I've got the high ground now, Anakin.
Yeah.
No!
Yeah. And by June 14th, Port Stanley is surrounded on land and blockaded by sea. The German submarines and the old fighter bomber Air Force that has been the backbone of Argentina's military are no longer able to effectively resist the British in a significant way. And General Menendez surrenders rather than let his garrison be starved to death. And that surrender effectively ends the conflict. As there is no declared war, and the British have with Port Stanley. The British have captured all military objectives. They've taken the South Sandwich Islands, they've taken the South Georgia Island, and now they have taken the Falklands. The war is over, and the British are celebrated in Port Stanley as all the imprisoned British citizens are more or less released, and they were loyal to Britain throughout this conflict. Most of the islanders.
Oh man.
No, because most of the islanders were British people who settled there.
I'll say, yeah. I mean, I don't
God
think they
save the
were
Queen.
willing to learn Spanish anytime soon.
No, these are Brits through and through, and so the British are celebrated, and on June 20th, there's a small contingent of Argentine troops just sort of stuck on South Sandwich Islands. The British remove them, and with that, the last sort of military matter in the war is resolved on the 20th, as just basically there was, it took them a week to sort of, let these people know that the war's over, please get on the boat.
War's over, go home. War's over, go home.
Yeah. The British capture 11,400 of Argentina's troops, and all these POWs are released to Argentina at the end of the war. That is the vast majority of Argentina's military involved in this war, is those troops. As for the casualties, there are 650 dead Argentinians, half of which died in the illegal sinking of the General Belgrano.
Wow.
Yeah, ships do carry a lot of people.
Not that, just the fact that half of them, so 300 or so.
Yeah, the General Belgrano was a near total loss.
But the 300, that's not the part that surprises me. What surprises me is the 300 that died in the rest of the war. Yeah.
Keep in mind, that's 300 that died when the HMS Sheffield was sunk and Argentina lost 30% of its air force. That's people that died attempting to hold the West Ridge over Port Stanley from the British. Argentina was dug in on that island. People died.
Yeah, but that's not a large amount of people. Like, the
Yeah.
lack of casualties in this is incredible.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
think? Yeah.
it's also
Yeah.
it was also relatively short. Well, I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah,
technically,
it
No,
was,
but
it was
war.
short, and keep in mind the war did begin with with Argentina having orders not to kill British soldiers.
Yeah.
So there was a wound don't kill policy going on at the start of the war. Interestingly, the British suffered 255 dead.
And how many came from the Sheffield?
A number probably came from the Sheffield and from just other military engagements, such as attacks on the destroyer pickets, and most probably from attempting to push into Port Stanley. Once again, the ridge line. But yeah, very few people died. All in all, so this war is relatively bloodless for the forces involved. And the aftermath, however, has some major political repercussions throughout it. For Argentina, it's the end of their government.
Yeah, as
And that's
usually
not because,
happens.
yeah, well, and it's not because the British end their government or because the government totally surrenders or anything like that. Because keep in mind, the war was never declared, so Argentina is no longer pressing any claim to the Falklands. Therefore, there's no more fighting.
Yeah, but usually in these instances with aggressor states, they tend to collapse if their conquest is not successful, and what a lot of people predict will eventually happen with.
Yeah,
I mean, it's also unusual because it wasn't. This isn't a total war, not like what we've seen before prior to this.
Yeah. This is not. We're not discussing the Great Khans where it's surrender or everyone dies. So yeah, the Argentina's junta is discredited by its failure in the war. This was its one popular move: was we are a successful military power. We are running a popular war to reclaim territory. That failed, and in 1983, so a year after the war ends, the junta is dissolved and civilian government returns to Argentina. So it's the complete collapse of the military government. The British, by contrast, Margaret Thatcher is able to leverage her hardline stance on the Falklands War into major political success. Her Conservative Party wins big in the parliamentary elections of 1983, and it basically ensures that she has a very willing government to enact her other policies in the coming years.
So she gets to go full girl boss.
Yeah.
It really unifies the government under the Conservative Party for her, which lets her become, a very powerful prime minister.
Which is ironically exactly what Argentina wanted, but then failed, and then British got to reap the rewards. Lovely.
Yep, it's beautiful. There's a couple other interesting things that happened. For example, the British did massive media coverage of the Falklands War, and it actually introduced some slang into the British language. Aaron, you were in Britain. Have you ever heard the term "yomp"?
I think it was mentioned when some of them were going on a hike, like because there was a few hikes that we participated in. I did one, but I think I heard some of the other, like the older folks say it.
Yeah. So yeah, yomp was British military slang for a forced march.
Oh. So I guess if they were saying like we gotta go now.
Yeah. So basically saying if we had to yomp through 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 those peninsulas to get to the bridge. Had to move entirely overnight. Like because the media is interviewing these people. So the word yomp would keep coming up as the British are marching across the entirety of these series of islands. Apparently became a popular slang term in Britain, at least at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Welcome to Grandpa's slang, everybody. Gee golly, mister.
Well, at this point, it's probably their parents.
Yeah, maybe. Still. Yeah. And we have one more note here is so with this war, the Falklands, the South Sandwich Islands, and South Georgia Islands, they all remain British overseas territories to this day. They are not called colonies; they're called territories, but Britain owns them.
I mean,
like I said, this is just another projection of British colonial powers. They just rebranded them. It's the same thing. You call a spade a spade.
I don't know if it's the same thing. I think if you're a colony, you're allowed representation in Parliament.
Are you sure about that? Because we sure as hell didn't get that.
No, we had American representation, taxation without representation, referred to the fact that representation for America was appointed in Britain by Britain on behalf of the Americans on account of how far away America was. And Parliament was often held without the consent of the Americans.
So let's see. So it's no longer the British Empire; it's the Commonwealth of Nations, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's no longer the Galactic Republic.
Yeah.
It's the Galactic Empire.
Which fun fact, these islands don't count as members of the Commonwealth because they're British territories. They're not independent nations that used to belong to Britain. They're British territories. It means the Britain still governs them directly.
Again, what for? What's the point of their place? Like, well, is it research? Is it like a lot of research stuff that goes on out there?
Well, now there is a lot of research out there now, and it's a base point for Antarctic expeditions.
Yeah, it's a launch pad. It's a launch pad for Antarctica, and that's really the only purpose to hold it, other than just what nation ever lets go of land willingly.
Well, and again, modern context, they also have radar systems and other monitoring stuff. The more you have across the world, the better your data tends to be. So it's just them keeping an eye out,
I think if I remember correctly, Belgium and the Netherlands are actually in the process of a peaceful land negotiation. Yeah. If I remember correctly. It's been a few years since I've seen it.
And enclaves.
But
they're like really, straighten out the border.
We've made it an hour here. Do we really want to start talking about Belgian colonies?
No, I think that's a great point for us to wrap up today's episode.
That's a future episode, probably.
Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to subscribe and check out all of our videos listed on the channel down below. Thank you for watching.
And before you go, everybody, we have one more thing to announce. Please do also be sure to check out Humanitaire Collections, a wonderful new shop we have with LGBTQ plus art by LGBTQ plus artists, with proceeds going to the Trevor Project, a suicide prevention fund. So be sure to check it out, and if you buy something, proceeds do go to charity.
Yep. Check it out. Thank you guys for watching.